You
I had to find the
You're muted now.
I had to find the video, but I did.
The video?
So here we are.
Oh, there we go.
Welcome to the Dev Talk Show on the last day of February in 2025.
Yes.
And it's a Friday, so that's good.
Yep.
I
That's a
think
good thing.
it's good.
It is. It's kind of nice, at least today. I was out there walking the dog right before we started.
Yeah, it's warmed up a lot recently, so that's helpful.
Yeah, which is a good thing. So, spring is on its way.
Yeah, I'm just double checking the state of the app here.
Okay. What's the StreamYard or a different app?
No, the app that we've been using on the show the last couple of days. We've been using a couple apps, or one app.
Okay.
I guess basically I thought we were going to use one old project, but ended up spending more time in the other one. So anyways, it's the Dev Talk Show, and we a couple days ago, we were answering a user's comment that they said, hey, this is great. How do you get the profile picture? And so we started down that path, both by looking at the Graph API, Microsoft Graph API, which I think is used. It's used for more than this, but it's a profile and organizational API. And I know you can do more with it. Like if you have the correct permission, it's all about my account. Like I know, and I've even done this before, is I can read my email, and then maybe do some interesting things. Like I've wanted, I don't know if you're like me, but I have an inbox that's filled with who knows how many unread emails. And I've wondered if I could write some app to help me figure out like what I should throw away. I don't know. But
well, there is. So one possible suggestion is there is an app for that called Copilot that can kind of help you triage your email.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So yeah, we know that we can use the graph to pick up a user's picture. But I sort of got stuck on why was it so easy with a Google account? And easy is kind of a relative term. But when we look at, in fact, I think I can go ahead and present here, and yeah. So to catch people up, if maybe I won't catch up too long because we've certainly done this on some prior shows. We have an application here built with Blazor, and the idea here, what we were doing when we built this app is we wanted to cover different ways to log in. And I think one thing I've always been very interested in since Blazor came out is and really this led me to all of ASP.NET, is deconstructing the whole authorization story, because I think very often it's easy to just do file new project, use a template, and then say like, well, I guess this is what we're going to go with because authentication is difficult enough. But this particular application, it is bound to a Google, both a Microsoft Entra ID tenant. So that means we've got the configuration to say we will log in users that are in this tenant.
Right.
I also have that for Google. What the Google API dashboard allows me to do is to get a client ID in secret that will allow me to create a web app, just like an app registration in Azure, in Entra ID. And to say, no, I want people to log in using their Google account. And in all these scenarios where we use external logins, which I'm a big fan of because I don't want to own login information if I can, you get back, you perform a challenge. There's a challenge that happens where I basically say to Google, listen, I've got this person here who is claiming they're one of your users, and then you get back a response. And that's all kind of buried in the code. to the point that it's as easy as this to set up. Is in Blazor, you say add authentication, add Google. There's a couple NuGet packages that make this go. I don't know if we've looked at those packages in a while, but I'm going to go ahead and edit the project file. Microsoft ASP.NET Core Authentication Google and Microsoft ASP.NET Core Authentication Microsoft account makes those two, it lights those up. And now all I have to do is say, hey, go get my client ID, go get my client secret. Those are sitting in a secrets JSON locally.
Right.
And for my single Microsoft tenant, so people can log in, users that are in the tenant, client ID, client secret, and what's the token endpoint and what's the authorization endpoint. And it's awesome. And then like, hey, this is great. But then I thought, like all good web applications, we all want to put the user's picture in the corner. And that's kind of the account home. You can click there and you can log out, or you can click there and see settings. Like we all sort of expect that in a web app. And it was this easy on the Google side.
Right.
And that frustrated because I wanted to know why was it so easy?
Because it is frustrating because some of the stuff we were talking about was, well, there are different packages, there are different services we can talk to. Why can't I just get this from the Entra call right off the bat? And I don't have, I've been searching for an answer as well, and I don't do enough of the. Certainly once we get enough of the deeper inspection of the authentication call to see why, if that's possible, or if there's some way to do claims mapping or something like that to make that come over, right? In looking at what's in, because there is a section, under the covers, we're getting an ID token, or we're getting an authorization token, access token, probably the best way to put it.
Yep.
And that access token has a number of properties in it, or claims as they call it. You can define what claims you want to include in there, including a bunch of optional claims. But in looking through those, I didn't see any of those that let me pull that over. So
yeah. So I have a bead on it, and maybe we'll go through this quickly so that we don't spend too much time on it, and we'll try to see if we can go ahead and solve this. So this is the ASP.NET Core repo. We're going to see that I've set breakpoints that will hit some of these files. But so we're looking at ASP.NET Core. And if I go to the source, let's see. That thing gets in my way all the time. If we go to source and we go to security, and there's not going to be a quiz on this later, don't worry. And then authentication.
Okay.
So in here, there are several folders that jumped out at me. One of them being Facebook, Google, Microsoft account, Twitter.
Okay.
Now this maps pretty well with is it ASP.NET Core, Twitter, external. Yeah. This maps pretty closely within the documentation. This might you might say like, oh, look, external authentication providers, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Twitter. Yeah, so what that tells me is, okay, this is in the box in ASP.NET Core. It maps up to the documentation. And that's why when you're using the documentation and they're telling you, hey, go out to Google API and services, put this redirect URI in your into their portal, and then put in the client secret, and oh, look how easy it is. You just had to basically say add Google, and now you're happy. Okay, cool.
Right.
Well, this is the magic. This is it. This is what makes it happen, is it's been implemented here. And when you go to Google's, every one of these has a handler, and the handler implements OAuth handler of a certain type of options. And that's how, what I figured, what I realized was that's how basically, even though each of these OAuth handlers are following a challenge standard, they have little differences. And those differences might be what goes in the challenge URL versus what comes back from the challenge. And so these handlers know what to do with that.
Okay.
how to build a
So it
challenge
extracted all
URL.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then after building the challenge URL, this is kind of the place of, okay, go ahead. I know this is the place where it happens. Go ahead and do the challenge. It turns out that's the spot. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes back, you just have a plain old response that gets parsed into JSON, and then they create an OAuth ticket. And this is the OAuth ticket this is where we're getting back to ASP.NET land, creating a claims principal,
right,
and putting all the other information in there.
Okay.
There's one little bit that I liked, this run claim actions. And I said, well, that sounds familiar.
Right.
Because in the code, the way you get the picture is you add a claim action where you say, can you map it out of the JSON? Can you map picture to a claim? And that claim's made up. That could say like eat at Joe's or get gas at Chevron or whatever. But instead,
Right.
I think in order to the sample that we used to find this just said, well, let's just call it Google Picture, which makes sense.
So when you're saying map JSON key, that to me means obviously in the JSON object there is a key called picture.
Yeah, there's a key called picture,
and the value of which is URL.
Right. And here's what's cool. We can see this happening.
Okay.
So I'm already logged in with Google. My personal account is pretty much like always logged in with Google. So I'm going to say log in with Google. And here's where we're going to zip through a bunch of breakpoints. But this is our own code, which people may not remember. We map identity endpoints to say, okay, go ahead and perform the Google login. So our code calls perform Google login. It does a very basic setup to say, okay, we're going to use the Google provider. We're going to put the return URL to be our own application. And then we're just in case somebody signed in, let's sign them out. And then we're going to go ahead and challenge them. Now that's code we wrote. That code was inspired by the code that's in the box in Blazor. But I was actually trying to deconstruct it a little bit so that we could understand what was going on. And we did this previously. If I zoom through here, we are going to end up now. We are now in ASP.NET code. And what people may not realize is I have for a while now intentionally done a lot of coding with the symbol servers on.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit of setup where your Visual Studio will halt and it'll be like, I'm getting the symbols. But what I love about it is it just lets me step right into the ASP.NET code.
Right. You're good.
So if I zoom
your project, so you might as well have the ability to look at it.
Yeah. I own the code anyway, right? Exactly. So here's the challenge async that's going to happen. And what's actually happening here is there's a little bit of a sort of dependency injection happening where this get authentication service is receiving a context that we filled out. I'm going to zoom in so we can see it. We filled this out saying the endpoint is perform Google login. And there's a bunch of stuff that I don't totally think we filled out. I think it kind of comes from underlying code, but it's basically saying, this is basically telling it what to do and who to call afterwards.
Okay.
So when we get to here, this is the file that I think is important. This is OAuth handler.cs. And you may recall just a moment ago, I showed that the Google handler is derived from it. So we've ended up in here now. We've ended up in the base class.
Okay.
That's okay, though, because I think handle challenge async, I think this is the generic way to challenge. And then it goes through and says, okay, well, now go do the specific thing. And we're going to see that. So it says, well, build a challenge URL. That build challenge URL is actually going to be overridden. And the Google, and we're not going to go through it, but the Google handler is going to take care of that.
Right.
But I don't think it's important to go through it.
I agree.
What is going to happen, though, is I'm going to hit, when I say handle challenge async, we're going to end up now. Oh, maybe I'm wrong. We are sitting here. I'm going to skip through this, though. We basically have everything we need to do the to do the challenge. And so there is in Microsoft ASP.NET Core authentication OAuth events, we have this redirect to authorization endpoint that we await. So this is the challenge is about to happen.
All right.
The challenge happens, and remember, you might remember on this line of code, I dismissed this line of code.
Mm-hmm.
I said I don't really want to go through this logging. Well, it turns out this logger is not what I thought it was.
It's not logging?
Well, you know, I'm still a little confused as to why it's called logger.
Okay.
I am.
That's right.
But the name of the handler, you can see here when you look very carefully, this is actually an object of type Microsoft ASP.NET Core Authentication Google handler. I said, wait a second. It's going to call handle challenge in there.
Yeah.
So when I zoom past this, we're going to end up where I wanted to end up in create ticket async inside the Google handler. So this is where I wanted to be.
Okay.
And it's about to make the call. Back channel send async is going to actually make the call. The response is going to come back. And when it comes back, just like any other API in the world, it comes back with JSON.
Yeah.
And I can look at that JSON. In fact, we could do it right now. I'm in the immediate window down at the bottom. And I can say response dot read as string async. And I'm not going to put in that context request aborted. I'm just going to do that. And we get back this, and this right here is the challenge that came back.
Oh, okay.
So to save people time, I've already pulled this out into VS Code, just sitting separately. This was a challenge I did yesterday with a totally different account. And it's just that Google in their standard challenge, they return this. This is what we were asking about earlier.
Right.
They return in the JSON picture with a URL. Oops, did not mean to do that. I could grab this URL. I can head out to any old browser. It's not going to work the way you think, though, because you might have noticed, somebody who's really sharp-eyed might have noticed there's a double backslash in here, or double slash, to escape it. So I think what I really want is just this, and that particular user account doesn't have a real fancy picture. So that's right. That's correct.
Okay.
I could pull this one out as well.
No,
this is no, actually, that's not it.
Unauthenticated.
It doesn't seem like it's. That's a good point. I don't think it is, though. But let's go see. Because I think what you're about to point out is the difference between the way it's stored in Graph and the way it appears to be stored here. So here's an in private window, and it's fine. This is wide open.
Yeah. Right. So you could send me that link, and I could run it here locally. So it's an anonymous URL.
Yeah. Now I'm not. The point of this is not to be critical.
No, we're not.
But Graph API would not do that, right?
Right.
That's the whole thing. The Graph API is authenticated. So, okay. So I was happy about this. I don't know how happy a viewer is, but I wanted to know. It was just, to me, why was it this simple? Why is that all I had to do?
Right.
And what happens now is we know now that the picture JSON gets put into a claim. That's what map JSON key does, is grab some JSON out of the response, map it to a claim. The claim is being called URN Google picture. We could call it whatever we wanted. And then you're good. Yeah.
So I guess going back, so where you were previously, where you showed that read as string async, right? The Google handler method, I think, is where it was.
Yeah.
So on line 59, you've got run claim actions. Is that a Google handler specific method, or does that method also exist in the Microsoft option or Microsoft handler? Because I guess what I'm trying to get to is there a way for us to somehow get that included and have it run that action for us.
That's where I'm heading longer term. I don't know if we have that
either.
just yet, but run claim actions is sitting in the more generic OAuth creating ticket area.
Okay.
So it's not specifically part of the handler. And I think when we jump in there, we're going to see that, again, I'm now sitting in OAuth creating ticket context.cs. I think claim actions are generic. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. I mean, the JSON is JSON. If all the claim action does is say, find this JSON and map this as if it were a claim, that's generic no matter what.
Yeah.
Because as you might have already guessed, if you're kind of little, you don't even have to be all that eagle-eyed, is I've got examples from the Microsoft world too, because I did the same thing. So when you log in with Microsoft, folks who watched the show last time know that I have the infamous example user who has a photo, but the response to the challenge just doesn't have the picture. Just doesn't have it. So the question is, I feel like there's several ways to attack this.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say any of them are right. One of them could be, okay, when the Microsoft account handler builds the challenge, could we add to that challenge? Could we say, I want the photo too, which I think you can in your graph because it's OData based and you can say, hey, throw in this extra stuff. And then it would just pop up in here. We'd map a claim action and we're done.
Yes. Which would be
part of the question is, how do you do that?
Yeah.
The second way that I think people go about this is once they have the user, I think they just turn around and make another graph call. Which
mentally was the path I was heading down.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No.
I just get a little hard-headed sometimes and I say like, hey, I want to see this all work. Like, for example, build challenge URL gets called with a redirect URL. So how, is that something, because I don't know that it is that something that we could inject into? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. I don't know that you can, because see how this seems to kind of be, I don't know that we can really inject this. So then the question is, do I really want to override this just to do one thing? I don't know. It might be easier to say, I'm the app that's authorized through Entra ID's setup. I'm authorized to read your profile anyway. So let me just go read it after the fact, make a second call. Or there's always the possibility that, how we talk about how these options are richer than I think anyone realizes. I feel like that's part of it too. I mean, look at user information endpoint. Gets or sets. This says here, oh, it didn't do it. Gets or sets the URI, the middleware, or access to obtain user information. This value is not used in the default implementation. So, I mean, I feel like we could, maybe it's super simple because there is so much sitting in here that I think most of us just zoom by.
Interesting.
I think a lot of time,
I mean, as part, and maybe I'm thinking about this the right way, but as part of the, I'll check myself on that one. I'm thinking of something. So I know in the B2C world, there is a middleware step or a set of middle steps where once this person's authenticated, are there systems I can go talk to maybe get the roles for that person or to get additional information and wrap all that up in the token that I then send out? So there's a bunch of things that can happen outside of your app that actually happen at the B2C level. But that's not what we're doing here. So, yeah.
Yeah. So here's where I think it gets interesting is deciding what do you do? What is it that you really want to do? And so I'm going to class this method, add Microsoft account. I'm gonna say this is built into ASP.NET. I mean, I guess I'm not wrong to say that it's built into ASP.NET because it is built into ASP.NET. If I go to its implementation, I'm going to be in Microsoft ASP.NET Core Authentication Microsoft account, and which is that NuGet package I was talking about. And the source code itself is we found it in the ASP.NET repo. I mean, here it is. So, this is the ASP.NET way to do it, and it may be configurable enough that we can get what we want. But not everybody in the world is using ASP.NET Core, and so Microsoft has a library called the Microsoft Authentication Library, MSAL, and MSAL has. They have a .NET version. And then they have a bunch of other versions too.
Yeah.
And they go on to this particular content, migrate applications, is kind of where I landed, and said, okay, here's a bunch of samples on how to use this, including, what if you're just a single page app, JavaScript? What if you're we're not asking you what kind of app you are, but you're .NET, and then when you click, I believe I'm right about this. Yes, when you click here, you end up migrating applications to MSAL.NET or Microsoft Identity.web, and then they talk about like why you should, and primarily they are talking about the older Azure AD authentication library, the ADAL. They're not talking about this. Article is not saying stop using what's built into ASP.NET Core. What it's really saying is stop using an older Azure AD authentication library before we brought out the MSAL.
Right.
So it's kind of a pivot on what we're saying, because it's not exactly the answer, but it's kind of the answer. And so let me see. I wanted to find, it's a start. I wanted to learn about the differences. There is I have a different one here. Okay. No, go ahead.
So while you're doing that, I was just say hello to Alan, who basically started this us going down this path. So Alan is I'm not sure if it's Alan or Alan, but is joining us live. So he was the person who actually gave us that initial comment. So welcome. I love the comment you made and the fact that got us kind of drilling into this for a couple shows. So appreciate that. If you have other comments or thoughts as we're going through it, feel free to chime in since you're able to watch us live. So welcome.
Yeah. I mean, and so, do I think there are simple answers? I do. But I started to wonder, like, how, I don't want to say how are you supposed to do this, because I think where I'm landing is that there's multiple ways to do this, and you have to decide what matters, what's the best way to do it for your app. But wouldn't it be cool if this was so ridiculously simple and we're just missing it?
Yeah.
But here's a place where I think a lot of people are going to land. I think a lot of people are going to land on this quick start, sign in users, and call the Microsoft Graph API from an ASP.NET Core web app. This particular example is going to walk you through a Razor Pages app. That's really not that different.
Yeah.
And here's what I find interesting. We configured, I'm not going to bring up the secrets JSON just because it has my client ID and secret in it.
Sure.
But we configured a very simple app settings with our tenants client, with our app registrations, client ID and secret, and our tenants token endpoint and authorization endpoint. And that's how we get single tenant access.
Yes.
In this case, when you use the MSAL, you configure things slightly differently. You don't actually have to call it Azure AD downstream API, but I don't have a problem with calling it that because it just keeps it nice and simple. And then you end up doing more. you put in the instance, you put in the tenant ID, the client ID. This particular example creates a client certificate. I don't know if we could also use a client secret. I don't know. That's just what the example does, right? It's a quick start. Quick starts basically are just like, bam, it works. Then you want to figure out what we did. Well,
the question is going to be if we need that certificate later on for the downstream bit, right?
Right. And then the callback path. Notice that our callback path is sign in Microsoft. I actually think that callback path comes from the ASP.NET Core implementation, the identity implementation there, that basically says, well, we'll do sign in Google, we'll do sign in Microsoft, we'll do sign in Twitter. But this implementation in the Graph API says, I'm sorry, we are in the Graph SDK. Let me double check. Yeah. Sign in users and call the Microsoft Graph API from. It's really using. It is using the MSAL though.
Right, but it's the Graph API, not the SDK.
Right.
If you look at the prereqs,
you're right.
Not, okay.
You're right. It's the Graph. It's not the Graph SDK, because what it's really doing here is it's signing us in with the MSAL. And then it looks to me like what's happening is it's signing us in with the MSAL, which the MSAL sets this as a callback path. Fine. Then it does this cool thing where it says, call a downstream API.
And you know what we could do then? Because you see how it has relative path me? I'm betting we could put relative path me /photo. And then you got it.
Yeah, perhaps, right? And this is a Razor Pages app, and you get this out. So here's what I'm going to do to avoid, because it's already 8:37. We definitely want this in our app. There's no doubt about it.
Yep.
But this particular quick start, I think we can get going quickly because it's based on, I might have this up. It's based on this application in GitHub, which I went in and took a peek at it. And I said, okay, they're saying that this is the sample app. Cool. There's app settings that they set. Okay, great. And then it is Razor Pages. And then what they do that I think is kind of neat, is when you call the index Razor page, they do the downstream call. And what they call the downstream API call. And then when they get the answer out, they stuff it in view data. Remember view data?
Oh, wow.
They put it in view data. And all index CHTML does is say, let's throw that out there. And isn't that kind of what I wanted? This is what I was like fighting so hard for, was to see that JSON. And it's like, oh, there it is. Sweet. So
awesome.
Let's see how quickly. Okay, so what's left here? We need to clone it, which I do not have this application cloned. So let's get a Windows terminal up. I'm a little concerned that my Windows terminal is like horribly out of date. Look at this. It's saying I could get a new PowerShell 7.5. Oh, it's a mess. Okay, so we now have MS Identity. We have this. Okay, cool. And it's a download the zip file. Well, I don't need to do that. We need to create a self-signed certificate. It says only use it in development. That's great advice. So we are in. Oh no, I need to go in a little bit further. I need to get to web app ASP.NET. So we're here. We're in web app ASP.NET. And of course, now I've taken us off the page. So I'm going to clear that. And I need this.
Yeah.
I'm going to create a self-signed cert. Again, this is just for us to learn only. Now I have to go to the Entra ID Admin Center. Should have been a little more prepared for this. So this is our Entra ID. And is it under managed? It was telling me where to go. Manage certificates and secrets. I guess we probably could have guessed that. Do I have to go to the app registration?
To do that
Manage?
part? Yeah.
Return to the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Select certificates and secrets, upload certificate. That doesn't feel quite like the same thing.
No, it doesn't.
I feel like maybe
top, just search for.
Go ahead.
Yeah, in the top of that panel, there should be a search bar, and it doesn't look like it's there. No, over the left rail.
Well, here's the thing. I'm sitting in the Azure portal. You see this bit here that says try the new Microsoft Entra Admin Center, which I think is what this article was actually telling me to do. Okay. In fact, I bet you up here it tells you how to get to it. Sign into the Microsoft, entra.microsoft.com. Turns out, and it took me away from the page. Why would you do that? Don't do that. Give me a new tab. I wonder if that's a change we can make in the docs. Okay, so this is not the Azure portal. This is entra.microsoft.com. I've never been here.
You probably don't have permissions.
Yeah, perhaps I do not. Which I know sounds weird.
No, do you need to? So, do you have global admin rights on the tenant? Probably is what you need. And is that something you PIM into, or?
I mean, you're right. There's probably something here.
Assigned roles?
That's here.
Yeah, global admin.
Okay. Well, let's see. We were on overview, right? Well, it's not complaining that much. If you have access multiple tenants, so we've already registered the app.
We just want to upload the certificate.
Right. And manage certificates and secrets. Return to the Microsoft. Maybe this is the same thing because we're in the app. Yeah. Well, so I have a feeling
the app itself.
Yeah, this is still being added to the app. So I didn't actually have to use this. I think this is the same. It's just something I'm more used to, right? I'm going to admit I've spent more time in the portal. So here's our application. Blazor auth from scratch, manage certificates and secrets. And we want to upload the certificate.
Yep.
So with a certificate is sitting, it looks like we put it in a, that certificate.crt was just created right in the root of the app. So I'm going to right click on this and say copy as path. Just because that'll get me here faster. And then the description for the cert, they gave us a suggestion. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at it. The suggestion was certificate for ASP.NET Web App, and that's fine. As good as anything. Okay, so that's in.
Cool.
Now, the next thing it says to do is configure the project, okay? And so this is the trick. We need Azure AD in there, and we need this downstream API in there. I think the rest of it can stay. So the Azure AD is going to end up with secrets. So let's do this. I don't have to do anything. I'll let you know when we're doing something that I should pay attention to. But for now, let's go to app settings JSON. This is fine. And let's get the downstream API stuff in, because this to me there's nothing sensitive in there.
Right.
So let's get that in. It'll be right above logging. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm just going to cut and paste this so we can see it, but then I'll go fill it in. And so we're okay for another second.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm about to do is I'm about to go to secrets.json, and I'm going to put this section in there.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you know what? What is secret here? The client ID technically isn't.
Tenant.
The tenant technically isn't, I don't think. I agree that maybe it's one step closer, but you got to have the certificate,
Right?
which right now is tucked away.
Yeah.
So
we know what it's called, but that's it.
Right, and the certificate thumbprint. Again, these are not. If it was a client secret, that would be huge.
Yeah.
We're not putting the certificate in here.
Right.
I think we're all right.
Right. We should be good.
Yeah, I think we're okay. So, what I need, I'm going to pull this off. I'm going to pull the portal off screen so I can copy this stuff in.
Okay.
And, you know, another thing that I tend to do a lot is I actually tend to destroy the app registration and recreate it every time.
Right.
So how do I get the thumbprint? What thumbprint did I just get? See, I got the ID. That's not what I want. I want the thumbprint. Oh, no. Oh, I could get it from the cert, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, actually, you know what? Okay, I found another way to do it. And so maybe I'll show people just in case. So right in the portal, this was like this. And I said, oh, what do I do? Well, you can expand this out. Okay. So there's the cert thumbprint. Okay. And then I need tenant ID and client ID. So I'm going back to, or I'm trying to go back to the app registration. And the tenant ID is sitting there, which I've certainly shared plenty. The client ID is here. That's it. Now, there's a scope I think we're going to need later, which we'll talk about, but I kind of just want to see this work.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I just put all this stuff into Blazor auth from scratch. Whoops. That wasn't the app. No, we wanted to use our new, I haven't even opened the web app ASP.NET app that we downloaded. I think we eventually want to get it into our own app.
But right now, everything works there.
I just wanted to use their sample for now.
Yep.
So let's hope the sample works.
Yeah. So while you're doing this, want to make sure we save a little bit of time at the end because Alan had posted a comment, and I think that it would, we could take a few minutes to kind of talk through the difference between what you're doing here, which is a Razor app, and what we were trying to do, which is a Blazor app. Yep.
Because I want this working in Blazor, like that's our goal. Yeah. But part of it is just to say, okay, the Microsoft Authentication Library sets things up slightly differently. So can we see it work? And so this is their sample app running. This is not our Blazor auth from scratch. And that app is coming up. It's using IIS Express. I admit I don't know why it's syncing as long as it is. I wanted to make sure there wasn't a breakpoint that it was stuck on. Oh, I think there's more to do. Okay, that's fine. There's probably more to do. I'm willing to bet that we have to go back to our app registration and authorize that link. So, what did I do with the instructions? Here we go. Okay. I think it's even telling us, right? Run the application and sign in. Okay, so I must have skipped the step to add the platform redirect URI. Okay, so that was skipped. So let's go back to our app registration. And in the app registration, we say, is it under authentication? Yes. Here's where we add the authorized URIs. And the app's even telling us what the problem is. It's saying that this particular library is exposing a sign-in OIDC link. And because I'm running it on a different port, that may be an issue as well. So we're going to add that URI. And remember how I forgot to save last time? So now both of these should be authorized.
Yep.
So let's come back here. What was the app again? I'm never going to remember. It was, so I think this was the URL to get started.
Yeah.
And it's definitely trying to do a challenge right now. Yeah. And there it is. It's done. It's all, that was it. So to your point, that all worked. That was what we wanted. I'm thrilled about this because I feel like, hey, this is cool that I went through all that effort to get the same thing. And here it is. So now the trick is, let's see, is this where we're at? Is in order to get the picture, I would love it if we could craft the URL such that the picture just drops right in there.
I think so.
So, so do we want to take a step back and talk about the comment real quick?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure, we can do that.
Yes. Real quick. So, yeah. Main reason I asked Blazor web app is as client and server sides making standard web approaches void. Yeah. It's different. It's different. So, you would absolutely positively, if you're going to use the MSAL, which I think we could set up, we would absolutely want it to be server side, like yes. Without a doubt.
Yeah.
And interesting with this client certificate model that we're going through, like this app, if we look at the program CS here, this app used add Microsoft Identity Web App Authentication, which comes from a different spot. This isn't coming from the ASP.NET libraries. This is coming from Microsoft Identity Web.
Right.
Is it fair for me to say that there's a little bit of a clash here where the stuff that's in the box in ASP.NET Core, maybe it's a subset of all the stuff you'd ever want to do, where this library is saying, hey, I will handle logging in. And furthermore, you can tell me what API to call after the fact. And I will take care of that.
Yeah.
And then I think at that point, it says, I'll take care of that. The add downstream API part. But what I'm not 100% sure about is what does it do with it? Like we've seen the result in this particular sample. Is it just sort of threw it up there? I don't know that it's doing anything with this data.
No, I mean,
threw it in. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's doing anything with it either. It got that JSON payload and basically dropped it in that view bag. And
Yep. It dropped it in view data and said, that's it. So I think what's not being given to us is what do I do next, which is in this particular case, because it's all being done in index CHTML, is index CHTML CS is saying, okay, let me make the downstream call.
Yeah.
In fact, how is that wired up? iDownstream API. I'm guessing that's just wired up here. That's part of what the services are wiring up. Yeah.
Yeah.
That must be what's happening. So it makes you wonder, like, again, I'm kind of back to, do we really need to do this? Or could we just set up an HTTP context in our Blazor server side? Even maybe create some kind of service. It calls Graph API. We construct the URL and then we just get our answer. I don't know.
I mean, you could. I mean, that's just straight HTTP client REST communication. But I think that's what it's probably doing under the covers too, right?
That's what this is doing, sure. And it's abstracted it a little bit.
Yeah.
Add a named downstream web service related to a specific configuration section. Like, wow, that's super abstract. It's like, I'll call whatever you want as long as you tell me about it in here. And there's nothing wrong. I mean, that's cool. I think that's great.
It is.
I'll call what you want as long as you tell me. So,
especially if it's something as generic as, or not generic, as specific as the person who's logged in, where I might want to use that stuff everywhere. So now I've got access to, essentially bring it into whatever page I need to.
So here's what's left. Our Blazor Auth from Scratch app, I went ahead and delegated another permission, profilephoto.read.all. You may not have seen me do this because I after we worked last time, I started doing a little bit of research into user.read, I think, contains what's called a basic profile. I think you need this permission delegated if your app wants to read the user's profile, and it'll even go further. And I think it'll read profiles like if you were looking up a group, maybe the management team, So I'm wondering if we need to add, and is it really that simple to add? I've already forgotten if Graph API's scope is just called profile photo read.all. Let's see if a quick search for Graph API scopes gets us there. Oh, hold on. That I might have seen a better one. OAuth 2 scopes. Nope, that's somebody's Q&A, which isn't bad, but I was looking for reference material. So photo or profile, photo, profile, photo. Yeah, profile photo.read.all. Here it is. Allows the app to read all profile photos of users and groups without a signed-in user, or if it's delegated on behalf of the signed-in user. So what I'm wondering now.
But I'm no doubt it will work. My thought on that is that's not the least privileged, because you're looking at all photos in the Entra environment.
Yeah. Let me go back to I agree with you about the least privilege. I would love for it to be least privilege. So let me say add a permission again and go into Graph. But see, there's a difference. Delegated permissions, application permissions. I picked delegated.
Sure, because we have somebody signed in as a person, and we can use that delegated permission to do whatever we need to do. As opposed to the app registration, where somebody's not authenticated, and that's the application side. So the application is doing it. And there are certain things the application can't do because it's not a signed-in person.
So the thing about it, though, is I picked the delegated permission, not the application one.
Which is fine. All I'm saying is I think that's overkill. And the reason I'm saying that is, here's why. When we did the Graph Explorer and we ran the me/photo, we looked at the token, and profile photo read all was not included in the list of scopes.
So yeah, I think what you're telling me is it's superfluous.
Maybe.
So this is my own account.
Yes, go ahead.
No, I get what you're saying is maybe this isn't necessary at all. So maybe I don't need to delegate it at all. I don't need to request a token with that scope. Because that's the interesting thing about OAuth 2 scopes is that I grant you access to scopes, but you still request them. So you as the caller can request less privilege than I'm granting you, which I think is great and what you
Yes.
should do.
Yep.
But at the same time, as the keeper of the realm, you have to think, okay, I'm going to give you these keys and I have to assume that you will use all of them. But then
Right.
you, as a good steward of the keys, only use the ones you need at the time. They're two different responsibilities.
Absolutely.
So, okay, the Graph Explorer is here and this worked. Now, what's interesting is that if I make this me call and provide, I feel like this is what you're saying. What if I
you pull
just
off the value?
Right. Then we get this.
Well, you'll parse the value when you get.
But see,
Interesting. Okay, try with the value. Let's.
You select to choose only the properties your app needs, as this can lead to performance improvements. So what it's saying here is get me photo. I feel like it's telling us do it this way.
Height width.
Yeah. Oh.
Value.
You think it's value?
No, I'm sorry. It would look for a number. So 480 by 3 something. Select it.
See, it's not here, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. So if you put the $ value back in, we know we're going to get it.
And what we get is an image JPEG with an E tag, so that we don't have to check it again and again. And I love how it's got like a code snippet here. That's cool. And so this is saying use the Graph API. And I'm wondering if we'll be happier using the Graph API instead of what we're doing right now. Like right now we're using MSAL, which is fine. Mm-hmm. Like I'm not trying to say there's anything that stinks about MSAL, but it's almost mixing the concerns where this is just like, hey, just go grab it, right?
Yeah. Now, are you going to be able to take that value and drop it into an image tag so that you can see it?
Oh, I have no idea. So I wonder though, what if we do this? What if I add another configuration here?
Sure.
And I say downstream photo. I'm not trying to suggest this is what we should do. And we put this stuff on the end. Okay, what if we do this?
Okay.
Then, and I'm not sure Graph, this is the way I want to go long term. Then we say add downstream API. And I called it downstream API photo, right? And I spelled it wrong.
Nope, downstream photo API. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. See, I already forgot. It took like all of a second.
And we also need a small s.
Thanks. Okay. Then builder.config.get section. You know what's funny is it would have been interesting. It would also be interesting to go back to our app and ask Copilot how to do all this stuff. See, that shows that I'm not yet thinking the way you do, right? About this stuff. Because it never once occurred to me. Never once occurred. So, all right. So downstream photo API, but there's more to do. We have to go back here and we have to say, in fact, I guess I'm just going to copy a lot of this code here and just say, okay, await. This is going to be a different one, downstream web photo API. And we called it downstream photo API.
Yeah.
I'm sure I've already, okay. But there's more to do. Oh, see, I'm not 100% sure. Oh, wait a second. Maybe I don't touch this. Can you add more than one API? We are about to find out.
Yeah.
The response, I can't, I'm going to say response photo because I can't reuse the name. And in fact,
change it on line 39 too. Yeah, there too. Sorry.
All right.
Now, different view data in.
I think one issue here is going to be, though, that we're getting back different type of content, and it's not going to be read from JSON async. I think that's going to be a problem.
Sure.
So
it's a stream, right?
Yeah. Right. Maybe I'm jumping too far ahead, but I feel like it's read as stream async.
Mm-hmm.
But now the question is, okay, so let's ask Copilot. If the content is an image JPEG, what do I do? And where's my little Copilot thing? Okay, so do I open a chat window? Do I pick a line of code or anything?
You already have it highlighted, and it's including the active document.
And so I just go ahead and say,
yeah,
how do I read image JPEG content when using read as stream async? You can convert the stream to a byte array and then encode it to a base 64 string. Okay, so I'd love to make that smaller, but it did some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But this was the key. I was looking for this.
Yeah.
But I can't. I wonder why this is so big. I've probably changed some setting.
Yeah, because your code window is 60% as opposed to 100, so this is probably your 100 view.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
But I mean, you could highlight that section and bring it over,
right, and then look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we doing here? We are reading the stream, turning it to say photo result, image base 4. Okay. I'll admit that I'm not 100% sure what to do with the photo result. I don't necessarily. Oh, well. How do I display it?
There you go.
But see, this is still Blazor, though. Well, I don't know. That may not matter.
Yeah.
That may not matter.
Right. But I think the one thing you do have to do is on that index page is put the view data for the photo result, because you don't have that yet.
Yeah. The problem is I would like for this to be a little simpler. I just want to see. Modify the index. See, I don't care about this. Right. I want to know about.
Honestly, if we take the value out, we know we're going to get JSON back, because the JSON is going to complain that, hey, you should basically use select and do the thing. So that's one way to just see if it works.
Well, okay. All right. So we just want to see if it works first.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I would say pop a breakpoint on 38. This way we can see when it gets to that.
If it gets to it. If it doesn't blow up.
Something's blinking.
Speaking of which, yeah, where did it go? I'm not sure that it had to sign in. Well, let's see. Okay, so this all worked. It's filling the API result. This didn't work.
It didn't get a status.
The status code was not found.
Oh.
So where's our Graph Explorer? Me photo value. Maybe that didn't work. Which, again, like I say, is it worth it, or should we have gone down the path of using the Graph API, the Graph SDK? But This is interesting. Like, why didn't that?
So take off the value and run it again.
Oh, on our side?
Yeah.
You know, it
doesn't
could be
find
that
then
it could be that I don't have the right accept header. That's a possibility.
oh, that's possible.
So 404 not found. So we're getting a not found.
All right, we must have missed something.
Yeah. Okay. So we've talked a lot about the MSAL.
Mm-hmm. So
and I've been wondering. Oh, go ahead.
Just a real quick thought. Just swap APIs. For the one that we know it finds, just make that /photo. Because we know that one works. It's wired up the right way in the code, so it'll get a result. So not this one. Go to the app settings. And then for the first one, downstream API, just make line 17 /photo. Because we know that's all wired up, I guess is what I'm getting to.
Oh, so you think, okay.
I'm thinking something's not good with the bottom one.
Well, let's find out.
Yep.
That's not what I wanted.
You reset it.
I'd like to make sure we have.
Yeah.
I want it to stop there. And not found.
What?
I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it just blew up. It doesn't know. There may be something. Add downstream API. That all seems to work correctly. I'm wondering if there's more to this that we don't know. Base URL relative path scopes. So I guess if I want to find out what more there is, that's using configuration. There's an overload. Add downstream API. What is the overload? There's a configuration overload, and there is a service name and configure options overload. And so the only reason I point this out is because this is how we say, it was configure options. And then we can find out what's in here.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Add downstream APIs, configure options. So there's a bunch of stuff in here.
Mm-hmm.
Theoretically could be used. I'm not saying we would use this stuff, but scopes, relative path, that stuff was set up in configuration. Serializer. But the rest of it's not really jumping out at me. Base URL, accept header. Let me go back to the Graph Explorer real quick. It is 9:15 already.
Yeah.
When we do this in Graph Explorer and we get my photo, the request header, I thought we'd see. Thought I'd see something. The response header tells us it's an image JPEG, but I thought maybe the request header would have it too, but it doesn't seem to matter.
No, that's odd.
I mean, I guess it's okay. They could just say, like, listen, photo value's probably going to, we know what you want just because you didn't ask for it. That's okay. So I think this path, and this is from the sample app, so we would have already had the issue of how does this clash with what's in the box in Blazor.
Right.
And it's not, and I think you can replace them. I think what you could do is you could say, okay, I'm not going to use the add Microsoft account. Instead, I'm going to use add Microsoft identity web app authentication. And I think you can do that. I think that would be fine. But I wonder, there's a couple things that I'm really interested in. One is I would love to know if we get anywhere with the user information endpoint. That could be a total red herring. And then what if we just create a little service to call the Graph API and just call it?
Right.
Because we're almost doing the same exact thing here. It's just the SDK is guiding you a different way, where it's saying, I'll manage the whole process for you. I'll do the sign in, and I'll call a downstream API of your choosing, and then you got to configure that.
Right. And what we're configuring isn't working, because you would think the base URL wouldn't change. I mean, unless it needs to be /me for the base URL and then photo for the relative path. But I mean, base URL is a base URL.
I guess, to be fair, we don't know exactly what's being called. Which again, call API for user async. We don't know what's happening here unless we were to step into it and say, okay, let's find out what it's doing. And at some point, it starts to seem like a lot of work just to
make a REST call.
Just to make, like we're trying to make a REST call. We're trying not to make it too hard, but I said let's go down this path first, but maybe just using the Graph SDK is a good idea.
Yeah.
So
instead of photo, what if you put /profile in there and one last thing to run? Because according to the docs, that should work.
Okay, so you think if it was me.profile like that?
Sorry, I'm trying to get back to the StreamYard. Me/profile. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to put that one back the way it was. I'll leave that like that. We got to do some other quick alterations, such as I think we will comment that out. We'll bring this down because you're expecting JSON here, right?
Yep.
Okay. So that way I'd like to be able to take a look at that.
Yeah. And you might want to change the object response on 36, rename it.
Yep. It's just going to be two. We called this downstream photo API, even though it's not. And then there's one more right here.
Yep.
Okay. And then API result profile. And just because I want to take as much time as possible, if we do get an answer here, we'll just see it.
Yeah.
If we get an answer.
Profile.
Oh, did I call it something different?
You called it too. API result profile.
It didn't like it anyway. Well, that's why.
You got to get rid of 16,
I did something here. Yeah. I think that was when I was messing around with it, right?
And the semicolon. Yeah, lose the semicolon. There we go. That's happier.
Okay, so we're going to end up here just to see. And then, yeah. So what did we get here? We got a 404. Here, we got a 200. And then it blows up because I don't have a good answer for that. Okay.
Maybe you can't do two.
Yeah.
So it's 20 after. I don't want to profile. Then comment that, yeah.
don't even really need it anymore.
No,
Which
anymore.
also
True.
means that I don't even need this.
Yeah.
Although I don't think that blows up in Razor Pages.
Not that way. No.
Just curious. Response is 404.
Not found.
Okay. So.
All right. I'm out of options.
Yeah. So, okay. So today we tried using the MSAL. I think the Graph SDK is probably the way to go. We might be able to wrap it into something simple for Blazor. And then go from there.
Yeah. It was interesting to explore that for sure. So I think it was worth kind of seeing what's there, what's possible. Now I want to go play around with that because I'm looking at an example that says it should work. So now I'm
okay. Yeah. And, so this is an interesting case where the MSAL solves a different problem, but what's in the box in ASP.NET gets you external login quickly.
Yeah.
Huh. It's just one of those things where I don't want to say they clash, but it feels like they kind of do.
They're coming at it from different directions. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And certainly the MSAL is solving this for all of the web.
Yeah.
You could see all the frameworks they cover. Angular, React. There are samples on there for Blazor WebAssembly. And in that sample, I've noticed they kind of do this all through JavaScript. I didn't try the sample, but we might be able. I mean, it's interesting. There's a lot of ways to attack this, and I wonder if, maybe it would just be cool if the Microsoft account. I don't know. I wonder where we'll land on this, but I never thought that getting the profile picture would lead us to looking at so many different things. So
very true. Very true.
But I do I'll tell you what I'm happy about. I'm happy that I understand more what happens under the hood when you just say add Google or add Microsoft account. I feel I'm happy that we figured out that in ASP.NET Core, we have this security authentication and then the different vendors that are supported, Facebook, Google. Well, I don't want to say they're supported. They're in the box, right?
Right.
Because you can add your own. You could write one of these handlers. All you have to do is derive. I make it sound this easy. All you have to do is you'd have to write these different handlers, one of them being off of OAuth handler. And I know there is a project. I got to find it. There is a GitHub repo with I feel like there's a GitHub repo with a whole bunch of these OpenID connectors that are ready to drop in. They work just like this, and they just drop in. So, all right.
Awesome. So I appreciate you running through that. It's Friday. It's the weekend. So hope everyone, if you're watching now or in the future, thanks for watching and hanging out with us as we try and explore what's going on under the covers with authentication and the Graph API. And we will, if you're watching in the future, leave a comment, let us know you're watching, and appreciate your time. So for Chris, I'm Rich, and we'll see you next time on Dev Talk Show.